My name is Willa Emerson. I'm 34. And for most of my adult life, I believed in family the way some people believe in God. Not because of proof, but because I thought I was supposed to. I'd just flown back to Chicago from a DC consulting assignment. Exhausted, still in my slate gray airport blazer. The kind that says I work overtime without needing embroidery. It was Sunday, family dinner night, mandatory. No RSVP required because you never got to say no. My sister Lee picked the wine. My mom cooked roast lamb, and I, as always, brought dessert. Tiramisu from Luca's, $48, not reimbursable. I didn't mind. That night, I arrived 10 minutes early. Old habit from the Air Force. I parked in front of the same driveway I helped co-sign 10 years ago, and carried the box of tiramisu like it meant something. The kitchen was dimly lit. My parents always liked it that way. Candlelight made the table feel more expensive. I heard their voices before they heard me. I should have rung the bell, but I didn't. I opened the side door like I always had, quietly. Then I heard it. Willa's salary alone could cover the back taxes, Lee said, flat. She won't question it, she never does. I stopped cold in the mudroom. We'll say it's for roof repair again, Dad replied. She signed those release papers years ago, she probably forgot. She's always been the useful one, my mom added. Doesn't ask, just hands over. There was laughter. And then Lee again. It's not stealing, it's just reallocating. She doesn't have a husband, no kids. What's she even saving for? I don't know how long I stood there, tiramisu sweating in the box. My keys still in my hand, leaving little crescent dents in my palm. They were in the dining room. The wine was open. The lamb was carved. And they were calculating what part of me they could extract next. I stepped back, one quiet foot behind the other, closed the door gently like nothing happened, and drove home without turning the radio on. That night, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I opened a bottle of dry white, poured a glass, and pulled out the manila folder I kept in the back of my filing cabinet. Inside, the original trust agreement, a copy of the deed, the audit report I'd commissioned after my mom asked for roof repairs the second time, and one letter my grandfather had handwritten the year before he passed. You're the only one I trust, Willa. I know they'll come for it eventually. Guard it like you did your post in Qatar, quietly and without warning. I was 27 then, and I didn't understand what he meant. Now, I did. By midnight, every account linked to the trust had new security protocols. I froze 3 credit cards I'd once given access to in case of emergency. I changed every login, and I set alerts that would ping me if so much as a cent was touched. The next morning, the first text came in. Willa, can we chat? It's about the house. From Lee, no greeting, no warmth, just purpose. I replied with a screenshot. The trust terms. Section IV, paragraph 3. Any breach of fiduciary assumption shall result in permanent asset lockout. 10 minutes later, she called. I didn't pick up. That afternoon, my dad showed up outside my condo, holding a manila folder like it might change something. I watched him from the balcony, didn't wave, didn't go down. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened a blank note, and titled it, The Cost of Being Useful. By 7:00 a.m. The next morning, my coffee was still untouched, but my laptop had already seen war. I sat in silence, no music, no news, just the soft hum of my router, and pulled up the private banking portal my grandfather insisted I set up years ago. The one that didn't carry our last name, the one no one else knew existed. Trust Emerson Grant 923B, status, active. Available balance, $3.7 million. Beneficiary, Willa Emerson, sole signatory. Contingency protections, armed, enabled. I scrolled past line items, the apartment in Logan Circle, the shares in Monroe and Chapel Tech, the foundation grant for veterans that bore no family name, but all my fingerprints. And just below that, a tab labeled Recent Inquiry Attempts. 3 red flags, Saturday, 10:22 p.m. IP address, 192, 168, 392. Location, North Shore, Illinois. User, Lee Emerson. She tried to log in and failed the security question, Who stood beside you in Qatar when the base lost power? Answer, I did, no one else. I didn't feel angry. I felt inevitable, like something I'd always known had finally arrived. Step 1, I called the private banker assigned to the trust. Vincent, a man who spoke in numbers and warnings. I told him to lock the portfolio under Tier 3. No wire transfers, no new beneficiaries, and no discussion without direct biometric confirmation. He didn't ask why, he just said, "Copy that, ma'am." Step 2. I opened the audit folder on my desktop, the one labeled plainly, Family History. Inside, a spreadsheet of every transaction I'd ever made in their name. $11,000 for mom's knee surgery, later downgraded to arthritis medication. $24,000 for dad's roof replacement, yet the same leak returned 6 months later. $18,000 transferred to Lee's startup, which dissolved the same quarter. But the most painful line item, March 2019, $62,500, Greg Emerson, attorney fees for undisclosed litigation. No one told me what it was for, just a Sunday night phone call. We can't ask anyone else. You're the reliable one. I still am, but no longer for them. By 9:00 a.m. the phone started ringing. Mom first. Honey, I was trying to check something in the joint account and it says it's frozen. I responded with a text. That account was closed. You'll receive a summary report via certified mail. Lee, 10 minutes later. Willa, what the hell is going on? I didn't answer. Then Dad, the big gun. You're making a scene over nothing. We're family. This is how families survive. That word again, family, like a shield they hid behind while picking my pockets. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, opened my notepad, and typed the sentence that had been forming since the moment I heard them. I was never the bank. I was just the only one who never said no. At noon, I called my legal contact, Carol Kim. Sharp as a scalpel, and even less forgiving. You might want to preemptively register the trust under Protective Clause 18, I said. There's a chance they'll try to challenge the designation. She chuckled dry. Let me guess, someone wants to relabel your gifts as loans. Exactly. You're not the first, but you're early, that's rare. By 3:00 p.m., I had locked down 6 accounts, changed 32 passwords, and revoked power of attorney that, if I'm honest, I should never have signed in the first place. Funny how you don't notice the paperwork bleeding you until it's already stained through. That evening, I ate dinner alone, baked salmon, asparagus, no tiramisu, and I lit a single candle. Not because I was lonely, but because I needed to remember that light can exist in silence. At midnight, I opened my email. Subject line, urgent from Lee. I clicked, Willa, this is insane. You're hurting people who love you. All we ever did was trust you. Please don't destroy the family over money. I stared at the word trust and laughed, not out loud, just enough to feel it in my chest. Then I replied with a single sentence, I'm not destroying the family. I'm just showing you who you've been this whole time. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, cream-colored, embossed, with a return address I recognized, Everett, Sloan & Kim LLP. For a moment, I thought it was from Carol, my attorney, until I turned it over. The sender was my parents. Inside, a formal letter 6 pages long. Subject, formal request for asset reconciliation, emotional restitution, and financial mediation. Filed by Mr. Franklin Emerson and Mrs. Darlene Emerson. Against Ms. Willa Emerson. The accusation was simple but absurd, that I had withheld familial assets, deliberately sabotaged access to shared finances, and most insultingly, caused emotional and reputational harm by ceasing contact without explanation. No mention of the tiramisu. No mention of the porch conversation. No mention of their plan to reallocate my salary to cover Lee's second mortgage. But they included screenshots of transfers I had willingly made, labeled now as loans given in good faith. I blinked. This was no longer a conversation. It was a war. I forwarded the letter to Carol with no commentary. She called in less than 10 minutes. They're bluffing, she said, voice clipped. There are no signed promissory notes. No emails stating repayment terms, nothing enforceable. They're trying to rewrite history, I said. Then we'll give them the full footnote citations, she replied. Within 24 hours, Carol filed a response, firm, surgical. Our client, Ms. Willa Emerson, has provided substantial documented evidence of financial support extended to her family over a 10-year period, all without expectation or agreement of repayment. She attached a ledger of every transaction, the trust documentation, email confirmations from my parents thanking me for each gift, a video clip, low resolution but clear, where my dad once said at a birthday dinner, "Willa, we don't know what we do without your generosity. This family survives because of you." They had forgotten that, I hadn't, but Carol added one final paragraph at my request. Ms. Emerson is not countersuing at this time. She seeks no financial compensation, only distance. That was the part that made me exhale. Not revenge, not punishment, just silence. On Monday, Lee showed up outside my office. No warning, no appointment. She was wearing designer sunglasses indoors, the kind that signaled either grief or guilt, maybe both. 5 minutes, she said to the receptionist. I just want to talk. I stepped into the glass lobby with my badge still clipped to my blazer. Didn't offer a hug, didn't smile. She took off her glasses. You sued us. No, you sued me. We didn't means. You never do. You just expect. There was a long pause. She looked around like she didn't recognize the marble floors, the framed security clearance badges behind me, the calm in my face. We're your family, Willa. You were. She flinched. It's just money, can't you see that? Yes, I said, which is exactly why I took it back. Another pause, her voice softened. He's scared, Dad. He didn't think you'd walk away. He thought wrong. What do you want? I thought for a long moment. Then I leaned in, voice calm as snowfall. I want you all to live with the truth of who you are, without me covering it up. She didn't reply. By Wednesday, Carol confirmed, they've withdrawn the suit. No apologies, no admission, just silence. I nodded. That's more honest than anything they've said in years. That night, I took a walk by the river. The city lights flickered on the water. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I passed a bakery that had just closed. In the window sat a single slice of tiramisu. Chilled, untouched, I smiled, but I didn't go in. Some things were better left behind the glass. The invitation came on government cardstock. Matte navy, embossed seal, the kind of envelope you didn't toss, you opened slowly. Inside, Department of Defense Recognition Ceremony, honoring civilian contributions to national infrastructure security. Recipient, Ms. Willa Emerson. Confidential location, clearance required. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because I had almost forgotten this version of me still existed. Before the financial firm, before the audits, I had spent 7 years in a quiet branch of the Air Force known simply as lateral ops. Our job wasn't combat. It was reinforcement, digital, structural, and often invisible. My last project involved redesigning part of the infrastructure security protocols for the Pentagon's backup grid. Not glamorous, not public, but essential. Apparently, someone noticed. The ceremony was closed door, no press, no cameras, just a list of attendees who had to pass 5 levels of clearance to enter. So you can imagine my surprise when, at the check-in table, the woman scanning badges paused and said, "Oh, looks like you've got additional guests listed under secondary protocol. Franklin Emerson, Darlene Emerson, and Lee Emerson." I blinked. I didn't add them. She shrugged. They were vouched for by the deputy secretary. Must be personal guests. Deputy secretary, of course, Carol's husband. She de-warned me. I may call in a favor, you won't regret it. Inside the marble hall, there were no chairs. Just a single aisle, tall flags, and the low hum of respect. I walked in from the back, straight posture. Name badge clipped, hair pinned up. And there, standing near the center under the 5th flag, was my family. They didn't see me yet. Too busy scanning the room like tourists who'd snuck into somewhere sacred. Lee wore a cream blazer. My mother clutched her pearls. My father kept glancing at the security detail like he half expected them to escort him out. Then the lights dimmed, and the voice came over the speaker. Please rise for the recognition of Civilian Honoree 7, Infrastructure Integrity, Counter-Surveillance Division. Ms. Willa Emerson. Every head turned, mine stayed level. As I stepped forward, I didn't look at them. I looked straight ahead, toward the brass podium, toward the general waiting with a pin in hand. But I felt them. My mother stiffened. My father's breath hitched. "Ann Lee." She whispered something I couldn't hear. Maybe a curse. Maybe my name. The citation was read aloud. It wasn't dramatic. For exceptional discretion, operational intelligence, and a direct role in preventing a Category 3 security breach to our national grid. They pinned a small insignia to my lapel. Gold, shaped like a compass. I didn't speak. I just nodded, shook hands, and stepped aside. But before I left the stage, I turned. Just slightly, and met my family's gaze. All three looked like they'd swallowed something sharp. And in that moment, I realized they had never truly known me, only the pieces I let them use. After the ceremony, the crowd filtered out. The room emptied, but they stayed, waiting. Near the back row, they stood in a stiff little triangle. Uncertain, uncomfortable, I walked past them slowly. Lee reached out first. "Willa." I stopped. "You lied," she said, voice hushed. "All this time you." "No," I replied. "I just didn't correct your assumptions." Dad stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell us?" I smiled thin. "Because you never asked who I was, only what I could give." They didn't follow me out. The sun was setting over the Potomac as I stepped through the security gates. The metal in my pocket felt lighter than it should have, because it wasn't about glory. It was about something far simpler, being seen, fully, finally, quietly. I didn't go out that night, didn't text anyone, didn't post the ceremony photo, though I'd been given the all-clear to do so. I went home, to the same apartment I had lived in for 6 years, same hallway, same lock code, same fridge that buzzed slightly louder when the light flickered on. I placed the pin gently on the kitchen counter and opened the freezer. It was still there. The tiramisu, wrapped in 2 layers of foil, dated in faded marker. For Sunday, I had bought it the night before that dinner. Back when I thought showing up with dessert meant you were still part of something. Back when I thought they saw me. I took it out, placed it on the counter, and stared. Not because I planned to eat it, but because it reminded me of who I was that night. And who I could never be again. I used to think kindness would eventually be returned. That loyalty meant safety. That the people who raised you wouldn't see your silence as permission to take. But what I learned was this. Some people only love you as long as you're useful. And the moment you stop giving, you stop existing. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because I'd already buried that version of me. The girl who never said no. The girl who co-signed loans and co-hosted birthdays and co-signed her own erasure. She was gone, not in anger, just done. The next morning, I packed the tiramisu back into the freezer, not out of sentiment, but because part of me liked remembering. Not them, me, the way I used to believe, the way I used to hope, the way I used to love. A week later, I got a letter from the Veterans Alliance. The infrastructure grant I'd helped secure had been expanded. My name listed as silent founder. That felt right. I didn't need plaques. I needed impact that didn't come with strings. I took the certificate, framed it simply, and placed it on the wall above my desk. Next to a photo of me in uniform, not with family, just me smiling, standing tall, covered in desert dust and sunlight. Whole. Months passed. Fall softened the city. Then winter came, and with it, silence. No more calls, no more lawsuits, no more sudden appearances at the office pretending coincidence. They had learned, not because I shouted, but because I stopped replying. One quiet Sunday, I got a text from an unknown number. "Willa, I know I don't deserve this, but I'm sorry for what we tried to do, for what we didn't say, for seeing you as convenience, not kin. I hope one day you can forgive us." I didn't respond, but I sat with it, read it twice, and whispered aloud, "I hope one day you can deserve forgiveness." Then I stood up, pulled the tiramisu from the freezer, unwrapped it, let it thaw, and threw it away, not out of spite, but because I didn't need frozen symbols of a past I'd outgrown. Now, when people ask why I don't go home for the holidays, I smile gently and say, sometimes, home is just a place where you once tolerated too much. I don't explain, I don't justify, because there are some wounds not meant for open air, just quiet closure. And if you, reading this, have ever stood on a doorstep, holding something warm in your hands, and hope in your chest, only to hear the kind of truth that knocks the wind from your ribs, I see you. You don't owe them another explanation, another chance, another withdrawal from the bank of your soul. You don't have to prove you were enough. You already were. If you've ever been the one who always gave, the one who showed up, paid the bill, filled the silence with love, then walked away to protect what was left of you, comment below with one word you wish they had said to you. Just one word.